Today I'm going to show you how to create a cool spirograph image in Illustrator, and it's really fun and really simple. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to be using is our shape tool. So we're going to either be using today the polygon or the star. And typically when you draw any of these, you just click and drag to draw a shape. For this, we are going to be doing the same thing, but we are going to be holding down the tilde key, which is Tilde. It looks like a little squiggle. On a MacBook, it is the first key before the 1. So if you look for like a key with a little squiggle on it, that's what you want to find here to use with this shape tool. So go ahead and select polygon. Now I've just opened up a letter size document into Illustrator. You can do this on pretty much any size of document, but letter is just my go-to. So I'm going to hold down the tilde key and I am going to click and drag, and you'll see how this is going to look different than when you typically click and drag a shape. So let me try this. Ooh, so you can see our shape is actually multiple shapes, and I kind of rotated it as I was pulling that out, and you can see that that also kind of rotated this final shape. Now if I wanted to, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and set a stroke color for this so that I don't lose the visibility on this. Here you can see in my navigator what that looks like, because sometimes when you have all of these selected, it's hard to really tell what the final image is going to look like. So that's pretty cool. If I think that I have too many little duplicates in this one image, I could unclick here. Oops, let me go into my selection tool, unclick, and then I could go in and select individual polygons here and just go ahead and delete those if I wanted to. If I'm happy with it, I don't need to do that. Now you can still apply all of the same things that you could with a stroke to this object. So if you want to apply it to all of the individual little polygons in here, you can just click and drag over the top, and then you could take the size down, you could take the size up, you could change the width profile if you wanted to make it a little bit different. But since it's so complicated, I like to usually stick with a uniform width profile. Now another thing that you can do is, instead of keeping this black, which really does look pretty cool, we could go in and we could change the color, and we could do that in any particular color we wanted to, or we could go in and we could add a gradient. So if I go into my swatches here, I can click my little library and go down to gradients. You can see there's a variety of different gradients that you can choose. I'm just going to go to bright, and here I can see all of my bright gradients. If I click on any one of those, the thing that you'll notice in the navigator, let me try that again. There we go. The thing that you'll notice in the navigator is that it's a linear gradient. It defaults to a linear gradient. So if we go to Window and we select our gradient window here, we can go in and we can change that to radial. Now you can also kind of change the way that applies in the stroke. So if you want to have that gradient go across the stroke, you can click here. If you want that to kind of go along with the stroke, you can click here, and that looks pretty cool to me. Or if you want to go within, you can click here. So there's along, within, and then this is across. You can kind of see the difference there. Now, let me click on maybe a more pronounced gradient, and actually let me go in and choose a different set of gradients so that you can maybe see this, how this applies a little bit better. Let me do this actually. Okay, so there we have a gradient, and we can see how this applies within the stroke. Oh, let's change it to radial again. And then along the stroke, which I really like, and across the stroke. So there's no right or wrong way, but you may want to click through those to kind of get a sense for what you want. And also, of course, experiment with that gradient so that you can kind of see what works the best for you. Now, one thing that we need to do before we move on to our next shape that we're drawing is we need to center this. And if I tried to center it right now, it might work, but I might have a little, some discombobulation because I have not grouped them. So I'm going to go ahead and group all of these before I align them. And you can just do that with a Command G on your keyboard. Or you can go to, if you select it all again here, you can go to Object and then Group. This says Ungroup because I've already grouped them, but Group is right here. So, okay, then after you've done that, if you select it with your selection key, you'll see your alignment options up here at the top. And I want to horizontal align it in the center, and then I'm going to vertically align it in the center so that I have that. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so then I am going to go in and now I'm going to choose the star tool. And I'm going to hold down that tilde key again and rotate this out. Now, if you find that, maybe that was too much, you can just do it again and again and again until you get what you like. Again, Command Z will walk you back. And undo anything that you don't like. So here we have our star. Let me go ahead and move this so that we can see it a little bit better in our navigator. Let's try a different gradient this time. I'm going to make it radial. You could stick with a linear gradient if you wanted to. I don't mean to imply that you have to do a radial gradient, but I think a radial gradient usually works better. But again, experiment with these things and see what works best for you. So once you have it the way that you want it, hit a Command G again to group, and then again, we're going to go up here to our alignment and horizontally and vertically align that to the center so that we're starting to have kind of an overlapping image here. Now, one last thing that we can do, if we go into our transparency window here, and if you don't see that, you can go up to Window and choose Transparency. If you go into this window, you can start to kind of play around with your blend modes as well. So maybe I decide to do an overlay with this top one so that I can see a little bit more of that other image down below. And, just play around and see what works best. Multiply can sometimes be interesting. Yeah, that kind of darkens it, makes it kind of stand out a little bit more. And again, you can go over and over and over with these. Now, the one thing that you'll find if you try to do this with the Ellipse tool, it does not work the same way as it does with the star and with the polygon. So if I hold the tilde key down and start using the ellipse, it's pretty cool, but it's not exactly in that centered kind of pattern like the star and the polygon. So again, if you want to just play with that, it's more of a slinky image than anything, than a spirograph image, but it's still pretty neat, pretty fun. You can also do this with the line tool or the arc tool. So if I go in here with the arc tool and try to do that, I get this kind of fan shape, which is also really cool. So it's just a fun little feature of Illustrator that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but it's a really fun thing to play around with. You do not have to do a gradient on all of these. If you want to do just a solid color on one, a gradient on another, that can be really interesting too. You can also always go in, and if you hit E, you have to select an item here first. Let me go in and select an item and then hit E. You can go in and use your transform controls to rotate these if you want to have a different angle, or to scale it as well. So if you hold that shift key down, click in the corner, then hold the option key, you can scale down different things. So there you go. Enjoy making your new spirograph images, and I look forward to seeing what you create.